Welcome everybody to today's webinar, the final installment in our Undi Empire webinar series for 2012, sponsored by Citrix GoToMeeting. Today, the focus of our webinar will be on how to become a KPI, not a key performance indicator, but a key person of influence. My name is James Tuckerman and I will be your moderator for today. Now, before we get started, while the latecomers continue to shuffle into the back rows, I'd like to show you how you can interact with us today. At the side of the screen, you will see a question box. We'll be having a Q&A at the end, but we'll also be inviting participation and interaction throughout today's webinar. So let's test this out. I would like you, yes, you, everyone who's tuning in, I would like you to share with me the name of a person who you think is a key person of influence and their area of expertise. So just use that little question box on the side of the screen. Perhaps it's someone you are already working with. Perhaps it's someone who was referred to you. Perhaps it's a complete stranger who you think naturally has acquired the reputation of a leader in their particular industry. So all I'm asking you to do is just to use the question box, give it a crack, name someone and their industry. Yes, here they are, they're starting to come in. The first name that comes to the top of my mind is actually my dad, Robin Tuckerman, who you may not have heard of unless you work in the packaging industry. But in his niche, environmental packaging, he's often the first name that comes up in conversations and the first person people will call when they have a project in that very niche area. So I'm looking for a name and an industry. Thank you, Greta, for saying James Tuckerman and putting a smiley face. What's my industry? We've had a couple Richard Bransons. Thank you, Daryl Altclass and Terry Dold. Helen Trelaw, coaching kids using NLP techniques. Thank you, Penny Votzurakis. Gian Pereira, getting thought leaders online, and Rolf mentioned him. I know him. He was the educator in one of our recent webinars. We have Jenny Cartwright in telesales. Thanks, Greg Standen. Phil Evans in software consulting. Thanks, Evangelos. Oh, I can't read your full last name. Menorma Rakis, Virgin CEO. I wonder who that is, Sandra Baxendell. Oh, of course, we're thinking of Australia's Virgin CEO. Jenny Mullen is an expert in email marketing. Thanks, Phil Gutteridge. Lots of names coming in. Michael Ruhlman is a KPI in food, according to Ross McKay. Charlie Marks, I love the person you have suggested, James Bond. Yes, he's a KPI in martini making, shaken, not stirred. Matt Barry. Yes, Matt Barry, Tech Revolution Global Workforce. Thank you, Ash Truscott. Peter Thiel, venture capitalist. Thank you, Peter Bushius. Peter Thiel, yeah, founder of PayPal, and also lots of investment. That's a whole bunch of different names. It's a lot of names, but that doesn't surprise me. What does surprise me, however, here is the diversity of industries. There are so many niche industries that are available for, yes, industry domination. I don't know if that's worth a maniacal laugh. Industry domination. Wah, ah, 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 ah. But that's the opportunity that's now available to everyone listening in to this conversation, the 200 plus business builders, 200 plus, yes, that are now tuning in. It's also why I'm delighted to introduce our guest educator for our final Undi Empire webinar for 2012. Today's educator has built several multi-million-dollar businesses, spoken all over the world, and is a best-selling author. His product strategy has driven several of his startups to achieve $1 million revenues inside their first 12 months. He's spoken in 10 countries and consulted with businesses in the UK, Singapore, and Australia. He's also the founder of the internationally successful Key Person of Influence coaching program. And he was good enough to join us earlier on this year to talk about productizing your knowledge. Today's topic, Key Person of Influence, is his area of expertise. That's the topic that we're here to learn about today. Please welcome Daniel Priestley. How you doing, mate?
Thank you for having me, James. Love being on your In Your Underpants webinars that you run because I get to actually be in my underpants
Yeah,
just to fully take place in the theme of things and to get into the feel of things.
because I know that normally you don't have your underpants. Normally you go commando.
Well, don't do the Commando series.
Don't do the commando series. That's right. Where do you want to start, Dan?
Well, let's kick off and let's talk about the key person of influence in your underpants, and really get into the idea that in every industry there are key people of influence. They earn more money, they attract more opportunities, and they typically have more fun. So we want to talk about how do you become one of these people, how do you position yourself as a key person of influence. Another context for this conversation is how do you play the role of key person of influence within your business. So some people who tune into this sort of webinar are in a bigger business, or they're actually working within an entrepreneurial division of a large company. And the idea is that it's just as important, if you're doing that, to become the key person of influence or play the role of being a key person of influence. And what we're going to talk about in this call is equally as relevant for those sorts of people as well. In my book, Become a Key Person of Influence, I talked about a 5-step methodology, and that 5-step methodology talks about the need for constructing a great pitch, publishing content, creating and aligning yourself to good products, raising the profile of what you do and who you're doing it with and who you are, and doing strategic partnerships and aligning to the right other companies and individuals. Before I go on, James, I just want to double check. Is it okay that you're seeing my screen and you're now seeing my slides?
I am. I just saw your book a moment ago, and I did want to give it a gratuitous plug so early on. Go back one slide. I read this last summer. It was that long ago, before attending Dan's event in January, and there was one thing in that book which I'm not going to go into detail now, maybe in question time. One thing, and it made such a big difference when I was actually going out and speaking to people at cocktail parties. It almost allowed me to self-promote without sounding like a complete tool at cocktail parties. So thank you, Daniel, for putting that little tip in your book.
For helping you to not sound like a tool.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
James, the other thing too is I'm having a technical thing whereby I can't actually see any of the questions that are coming up. So
that's all right. I'll be your voice.
You let me know.
Questions. Yeah, that's
fantastic. So, so I've got the 5 areas. Before I get into the 5 ways to produce yourself as a key person of influence, I want to set the tone that certain times. Now, anyone who was on the webinar 6 months ago would have known that I covered this in a bit of detail, so I'm going to really cover it rapidly, 5 minutes, just about the times we're in, because it is very relevant, because probably 20, 30 years ago you couldn't position yourself as a key person of influence unless you were born in the right family or had some incredible lucky breaks. Today is a different story, and I just want to share that we're going through some different times. We're certainly seeing some rapid change ahead. I personally believe that we're going through a time that's as revolutionary as the Industrial Revolution was to the agricultural age. If you think about the agricultural age, everyone was using horse and plow and farming and all of those sorts of methodologies. Small business was the default of the day. Most people worked in a small agricultural business or a family business, and most businesses had less than 20 people working in them, and they were very fragmented little businesses. Along came some technology, and it's really important to acknowledge the role of technology in all of this. And the technology basically said, if you're big enough and powerful enough to control steam engines and sewing machines and machinery and factories, you can become an industrialist, you can totally change the game, and you can control labor, you can scoop up all the profit that all those little businesses would have been making and keep it inside one business, and the workers within that business would become disempowered because they played such an insignificant role in production. What's happened is that technology has shifted things significantly. We now have the ability to run our own factory from our pocket. So, today I run a business that is we have an office in London, Melbourne, we're in Sydney, we're in Singapore, we're about to launch in the USA. I run most of our operation from my iPhone 5, and I do the banking from the phone, I do the emails and direct workflow, and I monitor what's happening in all the businesses. We've got a business that turns out over millions and millions of dollars. and yet we run on a fairly lean team who can work out of coffee shops if they needed to. So provided we've got access to the internet and laptops, we've got a small team. We turn over many millions of dollars in revenue, and we run it from our phones and our laptops. And it's made possible by big companies that have spent fortunes on technology that we don't have to pay for, or we only pay a tiny bit for. So if we want to, we could raise money on Kickstarter.com like a mini IPO. We use Skype every single day. We use Dropbox to change documents. We find suppliers in Indonesia and Africa and India through Alibaba.com. We find our marketplace using Facebook and Twitter. We distribute, using FedEx, Amazon, eBay. We find our staff and our team on Odesk and our outsourcers. And basically, each one of those is a multi-billion-dollar investment made by a big company that we don't have to pay for, or we pay very little bit for.
I totally surprised my board the other day when I showed them a line item on our profit and loss statement called cloud services. And it was $2,000 a month, which they went, what's this all about? But I'll tell you what it was. It was about, I don't know, divide 2,000 by 50. It was a series of technologies like that were just making life super, super easy. Basically like you, yeah, running a business using a mobile phone. And it was all thanks to all those little things.
Mobile phone and a pair of clean underwear.
That's right.
So at the heart of it, I know everyone bangs on about this, and I'm not going to bang on about it, but at the heart of it is social media, because it allows people to connect through ideology versus geography. So we find our marketplace wherever they care about the same things that we care about, as opposed to being down the street and being local to us. We've recently done a great partnership in the USA that we're putting together, and that was a partnership that was only made possible because social media allowed us to find each other as opposed to us to being geographically close. So I'm going to skip ahead, skip a lot of those social media slides, but what I am going to say is that be warned, social media has also created something called the free economy. And the free economy basically means that every small business now has to deal with the fact that consumers want stuff for free. Social media has meant that people want to interact more and more before they trust. So Google's research says that consumers, your marketplace, whoever's listening to this call, they want to interact 10.4 times with you before they spend any money effectively. They basically want to be able to read your blogs and tweets, and they want to look at your videos on YouTube and check out your slides and hear you speak and all those sorts of things before they gather enough momentum and trust to start becoming a client or a customer. So we've got to take all of that into consideration.
It's interesting. I've got a friend who basically advises people creativa on their web videos, and he teaches people how to create web videos which are never ever about their business. They're usually answering the questions that people are asking before they're even contemplating buying what that person has, and that's
lovely.
Targeting them before the zero moment of truth.
Yeah, perfect. And if you can have people do 10.4 of those, you're well on your way to having a fantastic relationship with a client. The other thing we need to look at is that things haven't disappeared, they've just moved over the last few years. So people might say, oh, funding's disappeared. Well, actually, it's just moved, because I see people raising, I see people raising tens of thousands. A good friend of mine just raised £80,000 using a crowdfunding platform called Cedar. I see people raising millions on Kickstarter every week, and I've got another friend who's raising a lot of money through a little crowdfunding platform called Bank to the Future. So funding hasn't disappeared, it's just moved. People say, oh, I can't find good people, or entrepreneurs say, I can't find good staff or good contractors. Well, they haven't disappeared, they've just moved. So we have an incredible team of people who work with us around the world. We've got an amazing girl in the Philippines called Shriza, who's our research assistant. We've got an incredible woman called Petra, who's in Slovenia, who is a graphic designer. And we find these people using these sort of outsourcing websites.
By the way, I must interject. We received a media release about a week and a half ago. A lot of people, when you talk about outsourcing to places like the Philippines, people say, "Oh, you're taking jobs away from Australians and blah 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 blah." This report actually found out that SMEs that were offshoring were actually growing and employing more Australians than their equivalents were over the last 12 months. So by engaging with services like Odesk, they were growing faster, which was putting them in a position to hire more local talent. How's that?
I would absolutely agree with that. That because we free up those tasks and can do them at a lower cost, it actually frees us up to invest more money into the growth of the business locally. The other thing too is, I don't know, I personally starting to feel like I'm a global citizen anyway.
Yeah.
And creating a job is creating a job. Shariza's life is a lot better because she's got a good stable job with us. Petra's life is a lot better actually, because she's got a good stable job with us. Petra used to be working in a graphic design sweatshop effectively, working for massive companies and massive brands, getting paid absolutely nothing. Now she's on double the income. She works from home, and as a single mum, she's incredibly happy working with us. And I don't know, I'm happy creating jobs in Australia and the UK, and I'm also happy creating jobs for people in other parts of the world as well, because I feel like I'm a global citizen. We use a lot of infrastructure. There's so much great stuff out there. We use project management tools like Dropbox and Basecamp and some of the Google services.
And you must add Podio to your arsenal. And they are Podio. They were recently acquired by Citrix, which just so happened to be our sponsor. So anyway, check out Podio.
So I'll check out Podio. I always love a good recommendation from someone like yourself. So provided you're willing to change. I mean, if you go back to that slide of the two guys with the donkeys and the plows on the farm in the agricultural age, if they tried to plow their field and keep up with the tractor on the neighbouring paddock, and they kept using their horse and plow, there's no way they could do it. They'd feel exhausted, they'd feel burnt out, and they'd feel that they'd feel pretty robbed of their livelihood. As soon as they say, actually, you know what, we've just got to move with the times, we've got to get ourselves a tractor and learn how to drive a tractor, suddenly they're saying, hey, actually, farming's never been easier, and it's quite exciting, this new revolutionary technology. So, James, I come across two types of business owners on a frequent basis. I come across some people who are very upset about the fact that things aren't the way they were, and I also come across a lot of people who are loving the fact that we're living in the most exciting times, and it's just purely a willingness to adopt these new platforms and new technologies. So let me go into a bit of the so what factor around the fact that we're going into changing times and the technology's changed. The big so what factor is a few things. One, small is the new big. 100 years ago, if you wanted to predict where all the jobs going to come from and where's all the money going to come from, you would say big business. You'd say get involved in big factories, the bigger the better, invest into the biggest ones you can, and that's where you're going to see the most employment growth, and that's where you're going to see the most value creation. Today, that's absolutely not the case. I was on the phone 2 days ago with a guy who's got 450 million net worth in the USA. He's trying to figure out and crack the code on how do big companies invest in tiny little businesses, because he said all the value creation in the economy and all the jobs growth in the economy is coming out of small businesses, not big businesses. So small's the new big. Small, dynamic, nimble, exciting proposition. So it's a great time for small business. Next observation is that the career is dead. So there's no such thing as sticking around with one company and having them promote you. I think anyone on this call knows that. But I do talk to a lot of people who, that's a revelation, that they're sitting there saying, when am I going to get a promotion? And I say, well, you've got to take this sort of stuff into your own hands. The other big trend that's massive at the moment is the emergence of personal brands. So personal brand used to be something that you only could even consider if you were on primetime television or you were a famous rock star or something along those lines. And yet today, every small business owner should be considering how they're building a personal brand, how they're dominating their micro niche. And basically, Google spent $1.3 billion setting up YouTube, and that allows you to spread a message without anyone having to green light it. And if your message is good, it'll get out to the marketplace. Same can be said for WordPress and all of these sorts of platforms that build personal brands.
What really surprised me was when I began to use Twitter, I was using it in ways that I thought were logical, talking about my life, and then suddenly I realized that people were getting cross with me for talking about my life, and I couldn't understand why. And then it occurred to me that they'd signed up to learn from the personal brand of James Tuckerman. It's interesting because so when they saw it, they went, oh, let's follow James because he'll be talking about business and entrepreneurship. So actually my personal brand had been hijacked. So suddenly from that point onwards, that's how I began using Twitter.
Exactly, and it's a great response. The next big trend is micro niches. So it used to be that you had to select some sort of a niche, and I would really encourage anyone listening to not just select a niche, but select a micro niche. So what do I mean by that? Well, today one of the biggest companies on the planet is Facebook, but Facebook actually started with a micro niche. So they said, we're building a product that is only for Harvard students, and that's how they started. They then said, we're going to build a product that's only for Harvard and Stanford and Yale. And then they said only for uni students. And then they said only for students and ex-students. And then they eventually opened up to encourage everyone in the world. But they started with an incredibly micro-niche proposition. So a lot of small businesses today, they say, oh, I want to be a fitness instructor. And you say, okay, well, for who? And they say, for anyone who wants to get fit. And an old way of doing it would be, I'm going to be a fitness instructor for men or for women. A new way of doing it would be, I'm going to be a fitness instructor. I'm only going to work with men who are aged 35 to 50, who earn more than 150 grand a year, who have incredible demands on their time and want to do a radical 12-week transformation at really awkward hours of the day. And if you basically created that as a proposition, suddenly you're away, suddenly you can charge a premium, suddenly you've got traction in the marketplace. So rather than going for a big market, go for a tiny little market as a starting point. Niche down, get really specific as to who you're going to help.
I run these workshops, and invariably I say, what do you do? Someone says, I'm a web developer. I say, who do you target? They say, everyone. I say, how's it going? And they say, oh, not so good. One time, just once, I asked that question. I said, who are you targeting? And this guy said, dentists. And I said, how's business? And he said, I've never had more work. And every time he thinks he's run out of dentists, more dentists come to him. It's incredible.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I do web development for dentists is a fantastic micro niche example. So here's the big trend to be aware of. Income distribution used to look like a bell curve, more or less, and the bell curve basically said that it was nice and gentle progression. Effectively, income was nicely evenly distributed. If you were a junior in your job, you might get, say, 40 or 50 grand, and then you go all the way up to 250 grand, and then there's a few anomalies, a few little spikes out there like celebrities and rock stars and you know, the Kerry Packers of the world, but most of the income was a nice little bell curve. Well, what is happening is radically that is being sucked up, so it doesn't look like a bell curve anymore. It looks like that shape on your screen there. And basically what's happening is that the few people who get what's going on at the moment in the times that we're living in are capturing loads of income, and people who don't get it are actually losing their jobs and their income. So I sat a couple of weeks ago with a journalist who was an extremely experienced journalist who used to be on hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, is now being made redundant and has no idea how he's meant to make an income anymore, even a small income, because he said he told me he doesn't want to change. He wants to get back into a big company, get a good safe job again, doesn't want to have to learn about blogging platforms or advertising platforms or videos or blogs or any of that sort of stuff. He just wants to find a new company to employ him again, and he's been trying for about 6 months. So what's happening is that there's, you know, this bell curve's disappearing and we're going into a spike, and I call the people in that middle of that spike the key people of influence. They're the ones who really get it. So the idea is that until you're a key person of influence in your industry today, your full-time job should be to become a key person of influence. That's actually what your job is in your industry right now, is forget about what you think your job is. Your job is to become a key person of influence within an industry that you choose. And that is where all the juice is within an industry at the moment. Outside of that, you're stuck in that low level of your income spike. If you're not in that inner 10%, then you could almost forget being in the industry right now. There's not a lot of work for those people.
And it's true. I mean,
So
like
how
if
do we do
even
that?
if you're working for someone else and you're in that space, it usually is they get job offers. You know, come work for me, come move to my organisation, the whole bit. I think, yeah. Anyway, sorry, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Even in the employment space, key people of influence are in demand, and they get poached to wherever those high value opportunities are. So we wanted to construct a way for tipping the balance where you go from being, we talk about 3 layers in an industry. There's newbies who are just entering and they're just excited and looking for any opportunity really. There's worker bees, which are people who know their industry, they know the work, they know all the functional elements, but they're frustrated that they're not getting paid what they think they're worth. And then there's key people of influence. So this is a formula for taking yourself from a worker bee to a key person of influence. It's not necessarily for newbies because they're not necessarily have the underpinning of the ability to do the work, but it's definitely for people who know their knitting and want to be able to become a key person of influence at it. So the 5 steps that we're going to talk about: perfect your pitch, publish content, develop products and align yourself to the right products, raise your profile, and do partnerships. Let's go through them really quickly. The first one is perfect pitch. So perfect pitch is really answering the question, what do you do? And it is the most, without a doubt, if you cannot pitch what it is you do in a powerful and concise and credible way, you're in some serious trouble, because if your own team or if your own family can't really tell what the hell you're up to and what the hell you're doing, you have no ability to make it spread. If others can't understand what you're doing, they just can't tell people about it. They can't recommend good suppliers. They can't recommend good customers. And effectively, you might have the most valuable proposition under the sun, but if they can't understand it in simple terms, they can't get behind it. We want to construct a pitch that you could give to a 12-year-old, and a 12-year-old would understand and be able to repeat back what it is that you do. Get rid of the jargon, get rid of the long convoluted waffle, stick to the real basics of what it is that you do, and communicate that passion, that purpose in what it is that you do, and be able to get it across very quickly.
I think in your book you had a great example where the worst thing that anyone can say to you after you've introduced yourself is to say, oh, that must be interesting. And it's you say, well, someone says, what do you do for a living? You say, I'm an engineer. And they say, oh, that must be interesting, which is code for, I've got no idea what you do and I don't care.
Yeah. Beware of the polite response. The polite response, you want people to create an emotionally engaging reaction where they basically want to drop everything and argue with you and say, you can't do that, that won't work. So if James Tuckerman said, I help people to build a business without build a business in their underpants, you want people to say, hey, you can't do that, that's not possible, you can't build a business without putting on a shirt and tie. Or they say, wow, I really want to learn how to build a business in my underpants. So you want to create that emotional engagement. I just want to reiterate, words have incredible power. This is Martin Luther King Jr. took 17 minutes to deliver the I Have a Dream speech. And he'd probably delivered a similar speech 1,000 times in the prior 2 years. And remember, he was a 34-year-old man at the time that he gave this talk. And that 17 minutes was so powerfully delivered. He had crafted such a powerful pitch for racial equality that black people, white people, poor people, rich people, all across America were transformed in hearing that speech. And they had to go out and talk about it, act upon it, and he basically kicked off a movement of constructing racial equality in the US. And it was a 17-minute speech from a 34-year-old man. So it's, we don't want to underestimate the power of words, and we want to construct your I Have a Dream speech for your business. When you talk about your business, you want to get to the point where you can really inspire people as best you can. I've got another friend at the moment who's kind of like a modern-day Martin Luther King in the sense that he's out there as a peace activist, and he created something called Peace One Day. He went to the United Nations, and his 15-minute speech got a United Nations unanimous resolution to create the world's first internationally recognized Day of Peace and ceasefire and nonviolence. And for the last 10 years, he's been literally getting 100 million people to buy into the concept of a Day of Peace. and it's really been one of the huge movements forward in the peace movement. His name's Jeremy Gilley. He's a friend of mine, and his biggest weapon is his 15-minute talks. When he goes out and gives 15-minute talks, that's his weapon. So we don't want to underestimate the power of words. Our next one is publishing content. Now, this is hugely powerful in the current world because published content has a potential audience of 2.5 billion people who can search it and find it and read it. So if we go back to the agricultural age, if you said I want to become wealthy in Australia 200 years ago, you would say, well, I've got to claim land. And claiming land was the key to wealth 200 years ago. Well, in the current economy, it's claiming niches and micro-niches. That's the modern-day land in the ideas economy. So if you think about, who has the niche called search, Google's got that land, and, Microsoft tried to take a little piece of that land and got less than 3%, even after a massive campaign, and all the power of Microsoft. So owning a niche or a micro-niche is as valuable as owning land today. I've got a niche called Key Person of Influence. Occasionally people accidentally blog using the words Key Person of Influence, and within about a day or two someone messages me and says someone's encroached on your land. They're talking about Key Person of Influence, and that's your land. It's really funny how that works. So in the agricultural age, you needed a document. You couldn't just say that's my land and just have a verbal conversation about where your land started and finished. You actually had to have a title deed to the land. Well, in the ideas economy, you've got to publish, and the more you publish, that's the title deed to your land. So if you say that you're all about radical fitness transformations, if you've got a book called Radical Fitness Transformations, if you've got a blog called Radical Fitness Transformations, if you Twitter about it, if you've got Facebook groups about it, if you've written reports and downloads all about radical fitness transformations, more and more you start to own the land called Radical Fitness Transformations, and that's what we want to do. The third skill is called Productize. Productize is a really interesting one, and we spend a lot of time with our clients on this conversation around productizing. Most of the economy is made up of small businesses that offer a service, and they think of what they do as service providing. In actual fact, service providing is a delivery methodology of a product. So essentially, when someone goes to a hairdresser, the product that they want is a cool haircut, and the method of getting that is the service of someone cutting their hair. So it's really important to separate the two and to actually think about what is the product that you're actually delivering, and what are other delivery methods for that product, or what are other products that could go along to enhance the overall product that people are looking to achieve. So for example, a lot of hair salons could be offering things like image consulting. They could be offering fashion advice. They could be offering various different products to help people look cool. If that's actually the product. If a hair salon discovers that they're in the business of helping people look cool, that really enhances the number of product offerings they can have.
When we launched Ant Mart, it was a massive eye opener for us because we became a reseller of other people's products and services, and suddenly we had to articulate what other people were essentially selling in a phrase. And the way that we got around that, Dan, was that someone had to answer the question, here's what you get. And it was interesting. The moment that you phrase that way, here's what you get, a cool haircut, it suddenly changed the language completely. Here's what you get. Even a service-based industry would become 10 hours of face-to-face service. But it was here's what you get. It was interesting. Yeah. You usually begin with, you will get a cool haircut. You will get 40 minutes of the attention of our best people. You will get a comfortable seat. And you will get wonderful music while it happens. It was interesting, but it turned it into it was the language of the product.
Yeah, brilliant. So what we do is we also have a very powerful sentence that we talk about with our clients called income follows assets. So most small businesses believe that income follows sales and marketing, and that if they want more income, they've got to do more sales and more marketing. And we basically say actually income follows assets, and the asset that small business has is their intellectual property and their products. So for example, if I took any business and said, okay, today I'm giving you an exclusive contract to sell Airbus A380s for any price that you want. basically any small business could make $100 million worth of sales next month because they've got the right product. They've got something that is basically a bigger product. So considering that you say, oh, well, how did the business go from doing $10,000 a month to $100 million next month? Well, what changed was the product, not their ability to sell or market. So one of the things that we look at is we say, basically, our assumption for any small business that isn't working or that's struggling is that they just don't have enough products. They don't have the right products in their business. And if we can give them more products or better products, then the sales and marketing doesn't have to change radically. We can actually dramatically increase things. Another way of putting that is that if you had a one-bedroom house and you said, I've got to get more rent, it's really hard to get more rent out of a one-bedroom house if it's already rented at the market rate. But if you said, actually, how do we turn this into a two-bedroom house or a three-bedroom house, suddenly the rent can double pretty easily just simply because you've now got more bedrooms in the house. So one of the things we look at is not how do we sell and market a one-bedroom house better, but how do we take a one-bedroom house and turn it into a five-bedroom house. And that's what we do with our clients. We say, what valuable intellectual property are you sitting on that's ready to be turned into products? And we help them to unpack it.
At your one-day event that I attended in January, and you're holding it again in January and February next year, you had a chap who was focused on that sort of stuff. What was his name?
His name's Mark Johnson. He just came back last year from Silicon Valley, where he was on the board of Bank of San Francisco, and he was involved in projects of raising $100 million or more. And his job in that project was to assess the intellectual property and to assess the viability of their products. So he's an expert at understanding, and he's personally built an incredibly high net worth through understanding products. And he, just a really great resource on our team. But basically, he looks at businesses and says, what valuable product do you have, or could you have?
I just thought I'd mention him and bring up his name because it was a really eye-opening session, which changed a lot of the way that we do things at Anthill, and I thought it was worthwhile mentioning his name because he's a bit of a legend in my mind, and I had a brief mental blank.
Based in Sydney now. Mark Johnson, his company's called Navitas. He also heads up Sherlaws.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, really top guy. So the fourth key is profile, raising profile for what you do, making sure that people see it. Now, you used to have to go out to the traditional newspaper and get green lights from journalists and editors and all that sort of stuff. Beautiful thing today, you can build a very healthy and very big profile just using YouTube, WordPress, Twitter, and LinkedIn and all of those sorts of things. We want to make the starting point for profile is a sentence that you are who Google says you are. So if I Google your name and not much comes up, then you're pretty much invisible just now. If I Google, let's say, Lazo Freeman, who's a client of ours in London, and you Google his name and along comes 12-week body transformations for rich men, and it just goes boom, 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 boom. Pretty much everyone who's talking about him or everything he's saying is that he does 12-week body transformations for very rich guys.
I love the literal nature of the language, which is what a lot of businesses don't do. Transformations for rich guys.
Yeah. The other way he loves to say it is, I do radical body transformations for men who do incredible things in a boardroom but ordinary things in a bedroom. So.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, it's the opposite of that. We just had the cool companies recently, and thank you, Jessica Tyler, for saying that our questionnaire was brilliant in getting new ways of describing a business. But a lot of those applications had things like, we are Australia's leading provider of liquid transfer solutions. And then you look into it, and they're selling hoses and pipes.
Wow.
When the most literal and obvious is generally the best place to go.
Yeah. Oh well, we always come back to how would you explain it to 12-year-old? So we do fitness and body transformations for really rich guys. Would be a 12-year-old would get that. If you say, we sell lots and lots of pipes and hoses to really big companies that construct buildings, 12-year-old's going to get that.
Yep.
I worked with one of our clients a week ago, and we took a really technical pitch that they had put together, and we just reconstructed it and said, we help people get a good education no matter whether they're born in a rich country or a poor country. And it's like, wow, okay, that's really simple. 12-year-old can get that.
Yeah.
So we're working on that project. So great news is, like, a couple of examples. This is a guy called Sexy Phil, SXEPHIL. He's 24 years old. He watches the news and then he retells it in his 24-year-old style. And he's got 810 million viewers at the last time I checked. He's on YouTube. This is Michelle Fan. She gets up every day and puts on her makeup, and she talks you through her makeup routine. And she does all sorts of special routines, different smoky eyes and Lady Gaga lips and all that sort of stuff. And she's got 600 million viewers last time I checked. A friend of mine and a client, Carolyn Miliatis, she was a chef, and I said she should do 10-minute cooking meals on YouTube. She just crossed over 1.3 million views, and she got signed for a US TV show called Chef Race, where they go across America, going from city to city, doing food projects.
Wow.
And she's been signed a really big celebrity chef deal because she hit 1 million views and they found her. So you can build quite a big profile just simply doing YouTube. One of our other clients, the posture doctor, just hit 1 million views last week. So it's amazing what you can do just simply doing YouTube.
I've said it in other webinars, but why is it that your favourite Masterchef is Rich and Famous? The answer is because they give away all their recipes. And what's interesting is the more recipes I film myself doing and posting up on YouTube, the more work seems to come my way. And I'm not even a consultant. I'm an accidental consultant, which means more demand than supply, because I don't actually do much work consulting. Because every time I do a video just showing you someone how to do something, it all happens.
Yeah, I can sense a book coming along called The Accidental Seven-Figure Consultant.
Lovely.
Lovely. We'll have to work on that one.
I can see why you're successful doing what you do, Dan. That's very good.
The fifth one is partnerships, and partnerships is really flipping the idea that if I'm going to do something, I need to do it on my own. So, for example, one way of next year we're going to launch into a couple of countries with my business, and it's we're going to be in the USA, we'll be in Asia, and it's absolutely impossible to even comprehend how we would do that if we weren't looking at who we can partner with in those places, who already has a great team and a brand and a reputation, and who already has the right staff and the right suppliers and all that sort of stuff already. So we can rapidly achieve huge things provided we're willing to partner with others and keep searching and finding the ways that everyone gets their needs met. The true spirit of partnership basically means that we're all in this together. We're going to work on this for the long term. We're going to have a lot of transparency. We're going to focus on, above all, building trust, and we're going to assume that we all get to have our needs met. And funnily enough, people in every project have different needs. Some people want to claim the glory and actually build their brand. Some people just purely and simply want the cash flow. Some people want equity when the business sells at a later date, or part of it sells. Some people want learning and want to learn the best practices. Some people are looking to add revenue to their existing business and simply just looking to increase revenue, even though they're not even looking to increase necessarily profit. So there's lots of different agendas at play, and finding a good fit between what you want and what other people want, making sure everyone can get their needs met, basically allows you to overcome the illusion of limited resources. We're living in a really weird time where there's never been so many resources on the planet, and realistically, it's just about finding ways to share those resources and get things done. I love websites like Airbnb that allow people to go into a new city, stay in a great house that would have otherwise been empty. The person who owns the house or is temporarily out of the house gets to have some income while their house was empty. The person who is staying in the city gets to have a great house for a fairly cheap rate while they're staying there. And basically the resource existed. It's just coordinating and finding a way to match people up and find a good way for them to work together.
My good friend Sebastian Eckersley-Maslin, who runs the Blue Chili Incubator in Sydney, says that every business has three customers. First one is the person who uses what it is that you sell. The second one is the reseller of what it is that you have to sell, or your JV partner. And the third one is the person or organisation that'll eventually buy your business from you. And every business needs to be built thinking about those three audiences in mind. Very smart.
So perfectly put. Yeah, so perfectly put. So yeah, we want to overcome the illusion of limited resources. I see so many small businesses that are, they're fighting over the scraps rather than working together to expand the pie. So anyway, this is a 5-step formula. We've put it together and used it with all sorts of people, everyone from investment bankers and florists and plumbers right through to workshop facilitators, business coaches, project managers. We've had sales trainers and property developers and interpreters and doctors, surgeons, physios, grief counsellors. All sorts of people have used this formula, and it typically creates a rapid uplift in the business. So between a year and 2 years from implementing this sort of change formula, you'll watch the business go into revenue and profitability growth, and it happens fairly naturally. It doesn't feel like you've got to work twice as hard or 3 times as hard. The business naturally expands to that new level because there's a new level of understanding around how the business creates a lot of value, and a lot more people start to understand it.
A couple of the ones I like was there was the App Man, and he was basically already kind of known as the App Man, but then he published a book called The App Man.
He published a book called Rich App, Poor App.
Rich App, Poor App, that's right, yeah. And he became the App Man.
And suddenly, and literally he does business in about 3 or 4 countries now. He's one of our clients. And he was originally a graphic designer, specializes in product design, and then he got into digital product and software design, and then positioned himself as the App Man, and he's just taken off. Let me have a look on the screen here. The marketing consultant in the bottom right has gone from 400 grand to 4 million a year in revenue. He basically niched himself to only financial services marketing. So he only markets products that are financial in nature, so credit cards, insurance, investments. He's built an incredible team of professionals now in New York and London who only work on financial product marketing. And he's gone from 500,000 to 4 million.
It's like my web developer friend just doing dentists. You nicheify.
Exactly. The grief counsellor wasn't originally a grief counsellor. She was just she was called herself a life coach, and her niche that she works on now is helping people recover from the loss of a parent. She only does recovering from the loss of a parent.
Oh, and you had that guy. You had that guy who was the getting engaged specialist.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Stammered and
Jonathan
stammered.
Krajewski.
Yeah,
Jonathan is about to release a beautiful book, which he showed me the digital for, all about the 7 mistakes men make when proposing to their wife.
Love it.
Or their future wife. And it's just really brilliant. I mean, Jonathan's proposal was nothing short of breathtaking, and every man in the room hated him when he talked about it. But basically, I mean, he's now staging and producing jaw-dropping engagement proposals. So there's just, we live in exciting times. You can turn all sorts of fun stuff into a great business these days. The good news is to finish up, most people are already on a mountain of value. They're already standing on it. They just can't see it. They can see everyone else's mountain of value. They just can't see their own because they're standing on it. And when we sort of pick them up a little bit and get them to look down what's under their feet, most small businesses are very humbled by the fact that they all this time have been standing on some really valuable stuff. And it's just, the real trick is just getting people to see what they're already on. It's not, there's a lot of people out there talking about the new fandangled widget, the new wealth creation passive income vehicle over here, the new multiple stream of income thingy over there, and all of it, I mean, I hope that it works, and I hope that it works for people, but the most bankable solution I've ever found for people is just look right under your feet. You're already standing on incredible mountains of value. You just need to dig it up a bit.
And as business owners, we tend to undervalue the knowledge that we have because we know it, so we assume it's not valuable. And then we turn around and share some item of knowledge, and people say, "Wow, I wish someone had told me that 5 years ago." Or I wish someone had taught me how to do what you do, every day.
Yeah.
Can we go back?
So,
Oh, no, it's all right. I was about to say, in the not too distant future, I don't know what your next slides are coming up, but I do want to go back over the 5 before we hit question time.
sure. So the 5, here we go, is perfect your pitch, publishing content, productizing value or productizing what you do, raising the profile of what you do and yourself, as well as doing partnerships and strategic alliances.
Yeah, and when you look at back and you look at all the different things that you've done right with your career and what you've done wrong, it's interesting. You look back and you say, oh yeah, things clicked when I got my pitch right. Or
Yep.
or suddenly, you get some big lead or client. You go, wonder where I got that, and you realise it was because you recorded a webinar and posted it somewhere. Or
Yeah.
or you're struggling away as a typical service-geared knowledge industry consultant, selling your time by the hour, but you've got no leverage and you're limited in your hour. You produce one product,
Yeah.
and then suddenly that becomes
Oh,
a
exactly.
product
When I
extension.
get people to look at their good old days, because a lot of people have in their head the good old days. 9 times out of 10, it relates to one of these things being really right. So a lot of times when people had the good old days, they had the hot product of the day. They had something that was the hot product. They had an incredible way of pitching that. They'd published some content that got a lot of attention. They'd raised their profile, or they had some great partnership in place. Those. When you actually combine all 5, you get incredible uplift. But if you go back and look at what constituted the good old days, a lot of the time these elements were present.
I'm going to ask you to give your event a plug, or I'm going to give your event a plug, and then we'll hit the Q&A. But I attended this event last January, and it was 8 hours from 9 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, and it rocked. There was a guy called Elliott that talked about pitching. That's the guy. And his background. Give us the numbers, Dan. But his presentation was sensational.
Yeah, Ian would be better known as the creator of the Gobbledoc, the Smith's Gobbledoc. He also created the Optus Yes campaign. He created almost all the major campaigns for Kerry Packer and his companies. He ran a thing called George Patterson, which was an advertising agency that got into the billions under his leadership. He worked his way from the mailroom. Yeah, he started out in the mailroom, and he ended up becoming the CEO of the company. It was one of those real, sort of Hollywood sort of stories. And he personally accumulated a massive net worth. He's got the 80-foot boat, and he lives next door to Russell Crowe, and he gets to hang out with the who's who of billionaire land. He recently negotiated the NRL rights deal for over $1 billion, and that's the kind of guy he is. He sits as one of only 6 people who chooses the Australian of the Year, and he comes along and he talks about how to deliver a great pitch. And his book is called Stop Bitching, Start Pitching, and he's been a really great supporter of what we do, and he gets out there and speaks at these events. Great.
What just blew my mind was that he grew George Pat's into $1 billion business in the 1990s when no other Australian advertising agency could claim anything even remotely like that, and it came about because he was just so good at pitching for new clients and then helping them pitch. So it's a great guy. And I can see that your next slide is Mark.
Yeah,
yes.
Mark Johnson, who just was on the board of Bank of San Francisco. We talked about him, raised hundreds of millions for his clients, and just a stunning example of an Aussie who went overseas, made really good, and is now back in Australia, sharing some of that great content. He's very good at understanding the relationship between products and also valuation. So anyone who's ever dreams that one day they'll sell their business for a lot of money will be able to raise investment at a high valuation. His presentations are geared strongly around the relationship between products and valuation. Really, really good one. Might also mention there that Andrew Griffiths will also be at the event speaking. He's Australia's #1 small business author. He's actually sold 1 million books. He's got 11 titles. And he's been published all over the world, 50 different countries. A brilliant small business author. and he represents Telstra Small Business and all sorts of organisations like that. So he's coming to talk about publishing content and how to do it smart, how to do it in a way that's not ridiculously time-consuming and that it doesn't eat up, and how to do it in a way that's cheap as well, so that you're not spending a fortune on publishing stuff that doesn't matter. Some people who want to get a publishing deal, he talks a bit about that as well. And a little bit of a wild card on this one, on this event, because we've got about 7 speakers, and I've only mentioned a few of them here, but a real wild card is Cathy Burke. Cathy is one of our favourite speakers. She is the CEO of the Hunger Project and raises millions of dollars every year for ending hunger in the world. The way her organisation ends hunger is they don't see that the world has 1 billion hungry people who need feeding. They see the world as the world has over 1 billion people who want to partner with us in ending their own hunger, and she sets up these incredible partnerships with big organisations where they basically you get the world's richest learning from the world's poorest, bold and courageous leadership, and it's just stunning what it is that she does. It like literally knocks you off your seat. When you hear about her approach and her organisation's approach for ending hunger in the world, it doesn't feel heavy and uneasy. It feels exciting and a radical shift in the world. So she's a great one. Yeah, so it's a great event. 18th of January in Melbourne, 2nd of February in Sydney.
Cool. So we're going to take some questions, but before we do that, I want you, Dan, to jump ahead to about 7 or 8 slides further than what you've got there. 3 reasons to complete the exit survey before you leave. Right. So in a minute, you'll want to leave and get on with your life. It'll be 1 o'clock. We're going to go a little bit later than that so we can answer some questions. But when you do leave, you're going to be prompted with an exit survey. And there's a couple of reasons that I want you to complete that. 1, you can help us build a better webinar. That's kind of important. 2, I've got a discount. I've haggled with Mr. Priestley, and we were given an early bird discount to run through Antmart, but that expired last Sunday. So I'm going to open that up to anyone who wants to attend that event in January and February, and also because of our wonderful sponsors at Citrix. We can get you a 3-month trial of Citrix. Now, this is kind of important. Earlier on, Dan talked about how creating content positions you as the leader. It's when people Google you and they find you, that they're going to, if they Google you and you come up, you become the landowner in that particular space. And I cannot overemphasize how good webinars are for doing that. We're doing one now. It's a great way to engage with a whole lot of people simultaneously, and at the end of the day you end up with a recorded item of content that you can circulate to prospects, to leads, make it freely available on YouTube or on your website. Can't talk about how good doing webinars enough in terms of building profile. So please, when you go to leave today's webinar, don't forget to fill out that exit survey so that we can get you a free 3-month trial of Citrix. Now let's answer some of those questions that we were getting hit with during the presentation. Do you mind taking some questions, Dan?
Love to.
All right, where have they gone? There they are. I opened up the wrong field. Now, Daniel, this is from Gregory Bell. What difficulties have you found with partnerships? So we're talking about leverage. Have you started out completely synergistic and then changed due to diverging partner interests? Good, bad, ugly?
Yeah, I've had some great partnerships, and I've had some partnerships that we had to end and had to transform. And it's all part of doing business, and I've found that there's never been, provided you approach partnerships at all times through what I call the spirit of partnership, where you are genuinely looking out for each other's interests, and you genuinely want to create more, and you genuinely revert back to the idea that there's plenty and there's more than enough out there in the world, and that we're going to work together on doing something incredible. That spirit of partnership tends to bring everyone back onto a good even footing. it also means that through the spirit of partnership, anyone who doesn't want to take part in creating a big, abundant future, anyone who's into the idea that we're into scarce resources and we need to divide up things and need to slice the pie, is free to leave the partnership and is encouraged to leave the partnership.
It's interesting, you know, when you look at like friendships that you've had throughout your life, there are some people that you've had a supposed friendship with, maybe you met them at school or something, and you look back and you think the whole time all they were doing was taking from me. Never once did they like say, how can I make my friend's life better? And when I look for partners and sponsors, it's usually that question, are they looking to make my life better, and how can I make their life better beyond the minutiae, the specifics of the contract or whatever you have in place. You know, I'm obviously a big fan of Citrix, but every time we do something together, they always come back and they say, would you like us to do this extra thing? It will just make our relation, you know, it'll help you out in some way. And it's usually something that's insignificant to them, you know, but it's great. Or like Dan, like, you know, talking to you today, we're about to jump online and you say, would you like me to tweet this? And I say, I would love you to tweet this. Thank you, Dan. You know, it's looking at the ways that you can help the other person in the relationship be the cure, rather than thinking, because we also have sponsors that basically all they want is, you know, it's all me, and it's and they're never enduring. It's sad.
No, it never lasts.
I've got another question here from Nathan Shooter. How do you align your personal name to your business if you intend to sell the business in the future? How do you form that, you know, draw the line there between what's you and what's your business?
A lot of people ask me this question, and the truth is that great businesses form around key people of influence. So if Richard Branson got together with Bill Gates and they said, we're going to work on a business together, and they put their personal brands behind it and they build up this business, and let's call it Teapot Productions, only because there's a teapot in front of me. Essentially, essentially Teapot Productions is going to be a huge success. They're going to build it up over a year or two. They're going to attract incredible team. They're going to attract, you know, industry's best, and those amazing team are going to basically come in and make a great business out of this thing. If they then exit, their brand and their name goes even bigger. Look what these two did. These guys achieved a really successful, you know, business startup and growth and exit. So their business, their reputation and their personal brand made it happen faster. It attracted top talent, and then ultimately it attracted the people who wanted to buy it and exit it. And then ultimately their brand got even better as a result. So this fear that people have, unfortunately, it is actually a bit of an irrational fear that doesn't show up as being true in the real world. The bigger your brand, the easier your life, as far as attracting top performers and top people. I mean, one of the most amazing things that I experienced was I released a book that became a bestseller. And as a result, we have this steady stream of great partnerships. We have a steady stream of high-performing team members who want to work on our team. We have a steady stream of great customers and clients. So essentially, life got a lot easier as soon as I had, tens of thousands of books out in the marketplace.
But it's just really the evolution of business anyway. I mean, like when I started out, I used to write every story. You know, the first editions of Anthill magazine, every story. Then when we were online, I had a couple of journos by then, but it was like, you know, 3 of us. And then you get to a point where, you know, I may not have written a story in 2-3 weeks. The other interesting thing is that creating videos to show people how to use tools. Not so long ago, I asked my virtual assistant in Brisbane whether she could show me how to schedule a Facebook post, and she filmed it. And then I offered that to my network, and it was interesting because suddenly it was I wasn't even creating the videos anymore. I wasn't even doing the education anymore. It was just being passed on.
You're curating it. Yep.
Yeah, curating it. It's wonderful. There was another question here that I wanted to ask you. In practical terms, who asked this? Greg. What percentage of the working population do you expect could become KPIs? And then he's asked, or is that the wrong question?
Well, to a degree it is the wrong question in the sense that whatever the rest of the population are doing really is fairly irrelevant. You've got to play your own game. You've got you've got a population of 20 million in Australia and a couple of hundred people who tune into a webinar like this, so you're already miles ahead just because you're interested. However, if you have a look at I'll give you a quick answer as quick as I can. The biggest issue I think in the next 10 years is going to be called technology unemployment. I think technology unemployment will be more disruptive than the banking crisis or terrorism combined. And essentially what's happening is we're going to move into a world where we have an incredibly productive economy that just doesn't need many people to run it. And that's going to pose one of the biggest challenges of our time. And a lot of stuff is going to stem from technology unemployment. What that means is that everyone will be free to, if they want to, create a business around something that it looks a bit more like art or a passion than functionality. So what the economy will look like when it gets through this, and on the other side of technology unemployment and its huge disruptive nature, what it'll look like on the other side is that a lot of people will be working in passion projects, and a lot of people will be working in solving the real problems of the planet, and a lot of people will be working doing things that they love that kind of today would look like art or frivolous. And essentially we want to say, okay, well let's move there faster. So I would encourage you to go and do the frivolous thing and the artistic thing and figure out how it's going to look, because that will actually prepare you for the economy that we're going into.
Well, I met a woman the other day whose entire business was based on buttons. Now, I'm talking about like badges, the American expression for buttons. And she's building a career out of it because she loves buttons. She loves those little badges that you pin on your chest to say, whether you're into something or not. Now I'm going to wind up. There's a couple more questions. I'm sorry that we can't get to everyone, but I will we'll be sending a link with an email after this with a link to the presentation, and I'm going to make sure that there's a comment box underneath it. So if anyone has any questions, they can ask Daniel directly. But I do want to finish on a quote, care of Patrick Bukusis, who just chimed in at exactly 1 p.m. just to let me know what time it is, just by chance there. And he said, "I saw a good quote today, and I think it's a great one to finish on." Here's the quote: "Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care." What a fantastic way to end the day. So I'll sign off now. Greta wants to know, will there be a podcast? Yes, thank you, Patrick. That's by Theodore Roosevelt. Timeless quote. So make sure that you fill out the questionnaire when you finish. We'll be circulating an email in the not too distant future featuring a link to a recorded version of the webinar, as well as a copy of Dan's slides, and also a link to the event that's happening in Melbourne in late January and Sydney in early February. And the early bird special that we had was $19 a ticket for a full day, which is pretty bloody astonishingly good. So I actually urge you to take advantage of that. So signing off, thank you so much, Dan. Thank you so much for everyone who's listening. Anything that you want to finish on, Dan?
Oh, it's just been a real pleasure. Every time I meet up with people who are attracted to what you're doing with Anthill, they're very good people. I love your events, and I love the people that you attract. So I'm just very grateful that you'd have me on the call.
And a special farewell to Stu Lloyd, who just piped in, who just said, "Hi, James and Daniel. Just wanted to say thanks for the inspiration. Sitting here in Bangkok, not in my underpants, but in my sarong and getting set for a big day. Cheers, Stu Lloyd." Well done, mate. Well done, Dan. Thank you, everyone else, for listening in. And we'll see you next time. See you next year. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, whatever your religious belief, or if you're an atheist, have a great holiday, a relaxing time off, and recharge for the new year. Thanks, everyone, for a great year. We'll catch you in January. Signing off.